just my way to hide and to try to cover up because I was embarrassed about myself. Like now, I'm like, that's ridiculous. Why would I do that? And I just tried to walk the halls quietly and just not be seen. And that was
Hmm.
probably only 5 to 7 years ago. It's not like it was that long ago.
Right.
So yeah, we have these moments, we have these things, and we don't feel like our best self, or we feel like hiding. But like that doesn't mean that we can't come out of it. It doesn't mean that you can't feel like a badass, or you can't feel awesome about who you are or get comfortable with it in the long run. It's a process.
Right. Welcome back to the Own Your Awkward podcast. I'm your host, Andy Vargo, and every episode we get into what has made our guests vulnerable and how they've learned how to own their awkward in order to live their best life. Stay tuned so you can hear every awkward moment in today's show. Hey, friends, welcome back to a very special episode of our podcast today. I'm saying our podcast because we are doing a joint episode. I've got my amazing friend here, Marie Sonneman, and Marie is, you know her from Ordinary to Badass. We are business besties. We are always collaborating, always keeping each other accountable, and we're going to get into what is awkward about being a badass today. Marie, hello.
Hello. Hello. Yes, I just dropped something right when we started recording. That is awesome and awkward. So there you go.
Lean into it. It's badass.
Yes. But no, I'm excited to be hanging with my friend Andy, who is Own Your Awkward or Awkward Career. And you're freaking awesome. So I'm excited to be recording this with you, friend.
Oh, as I, we're gonna have a love fest here today, so you guys are just gonna have to get used to this because, so Marie and I started getting together in the last couple of years. I don't know when it actually started. That it was Marie was like, "Hey, you're doing a podcast, you're doing coaching, I'm doing a podcast. Like, maybe we should work together and catch up every once in a while." We started having coffee and just setting goals every couple weeks at once a month, depending on what's going on our calendars. And it has been a game changer. I know for me, I would say for both of us.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's like, it's amazing how just like a little bit of accountability or like somebody else to like push you when you're feeling down or having the hard times. And it really helps you get past those hard moments or those times where you want to quit.
Oh, it definitely does. I was just sharing before we hit the record button. I was just sharing how this was kind of a downer weekend for me, and I was working on a project, and it wasn't quite coming together. And I was thinking, oh, I could just give up and move on and trash that till later. And I I tell you, even though we weren't having coffee today, I was in my head going, what would Marie be saying to me right now? What would she be getting on me about? And it really it changes your mindset in the moments, even when you're not with that partner, because it's like your advice is almost on hold in the back of my head of like, wait, I know what she's going to say to me, and so I might as well take those actions now. And then if those don't work, then I can be like, Marie, now what?
Totally, totally. And like we recently did or I recently did a post on Instagram, and it was of a text kind of exchange between you and I. And it's like I was struggling because I had canceled a podcast interview just for like mental health reasons. I just wasn't all there. And you sent me a text message like encouraging me, being like, well, it is pretty badass, to still take time for your own mental health. And so like it's just cool to me to have a friend to help you get over the hump, to get through the hard times. And then also kind of different, but the intersection between awkward and badass, because I think a lot of people wouldn't think that you could be awkward and a badass. And so I love that.
Yeah, it is a great thing that blends together, especially the way you define badass, because you take it in a different direction that is not just, oh, you've got to be a badass with a leather jacket on a motorcycle, all these, kind of tropes about how you're supposed to act as a badass in the world. Your whole point of view is that we're all doing all these badass things. So maybe help us understand that for people who haven't seen your stuff yet.
Yeah. So I it all started for me when I worked in law enforcement. I joined law enforcement and I lost my confidence, and other people would look at me and be like, "Marie, you're such a badass." But I didn't feel like one at all, and I was too busy comparing myself to that of all my coworkers, and I thought I worked mostly with men, and I thought I had to do things the exact same way they did, and it led me to losing my confidence completely. And really over time, paying off debt was for whatever reason just the trigger for me. I paid off $106,000 in debt in just under 2 years. And that is where I found my confidence. It's like, oh yeah, you can make mistakes, like a ton of mistakes on along the way. Like I made a bunch of mistakes paying off debt, but yet still I got there in a relatively short amount of time. So that just kind of reminded me like, okay, you don't have to have a motorcycle, a leather jacket, a cigarette, a badge and a gun. That doesn't make you a badass at all. What makes you a badass is like the internal confidence, the authenticity, being you, owning your awkward, and just I think the mindset, it's more of a mindset piece as opposed to like a physical object.
Wow, you know what I really struck me when you first started telling that story is how the thing that you talked about that one would think would be what makes you being a badass is achieving your goal. Like you joined enforcement, whether that's joining law enforcement or, graduating a course you're taking or whatever that thing is that is getting you to where you want to be. You achieved that goal and then didn't feel like a badass. And, we see that a lot with imposter syndrome or things where people have these things in our own head that get in the way, and yet the outside world is looking at you going, "Wait, you are the badass." So how did you kind of shift that in your head to get to where you say, "Wait, it is the ordinary things that are what make me a badass from the inside."
Um, I don't know if there's a specific moment. I think it was really kind of a series of events over time. And, like I said, it started with the finances. And then I think I ran a marathon and I wasn't a runner. So it's like, oh, if I'm not a runner, or I didn't consider myself one, if I'm not a runner and I could do that, then what else can I do? And it's kind of like over time, I started to build confidence in my abilities once I started to trust myself more and do things that I wanted to do as opposed to doing things that other people or I thought other people would want me to do. It was really just kind of trusting and relying on myself and my instincts as opposed to doing what I thought was the next right move.
Mm, I absolutely love that. So, just the amount of things that you've shared just in the last 30 seconds or minute of amazingly badassery things, running a marathon, joining law enforcement, freaking paying off $106,000 of debt. That is amazing in any time frame, let alone in less than 2 years. And so, um, what's interesting to me too is that, like you mentioned, this text from a week ago or whenever it was that you posted the other day, and it's just amazing that you can do all those things and then still have moments of not feeling like a badass.
Yeah, moments of not feeling like a badass, moments of feeling like a failure, of feeling awkward and not sure what to do or what the next step is. It's like there's many more moments of awkward, of failure, of not doing the right thing than there is of the success. And I think like somebody had told me before, it's built up like your accomplishments, your goals, they're built up of the ordinary days of the work you put in every single day, not that final achievement. Like me running the marathon, it wasn't the marathon day that was the big deal. It was all the training days that led up to the marathon day.
Yeah. That's so true. I heard one time that the feeling we get of success actually comes from the actions that we're taking towards the success more so than getting the prize that we achieve when we win or when we get to that goal. So that's where a lot of times these negative thoughts come in after we win or after we achieve our goal because we're no longer fighting for that thing. And so we no longer have the feeling tied to the success because that feeling comes when we are taking those actions. So how do you reenact that? How do you make that happen in your day-to-day life now when you've already hit that milestone?
Um, Well, it's twofold. I was gonna say let it be in the past. Like you did something that's cool, let it be in the past. What's today gonna bring? And
Mm,
kind of focus on the first step that you can take. You don't have to know every step that you're gonna take along the way. Just know the first step that you want to take. So I think that's huge. But then, even as I said it, I was like, well, you don't want to forget your past completely because I am a believer that the things that gave you confidence in the past or the things that you accomplished you can look back at those things and remember those things, maybe even have a symbol around your house. Like, okay, I have a medal from winning that marathon. So, like, I
mhm.
can look at that and remember the confidence I had when I crossed that finish line and then try to apply that same confidence to the next thing that I'm going for, even if I'm not feeling that confident about it. It's like, oh, there was a time I didn't feel that confident about running, but yet I got there, so I can do the same thing here and try to visualize like the same confidence going into whatever I'm working on.
Yeah, I love that. Do you think it would be a good idea to have like a journal with the proof of your badassery?
Yes, for sure. How did
So
you know, friend?
so if you haven't seen yet, Marie has an amazing journal that is your proof of your badassery that you can track. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's the proof of my badassery guided journal. And really, it's a series of questions and it asks you about different things from your past and it helps prove to you that you are a badass because I think it's so easy for us to forget it. And we think that some things are just ordinary day to day, but they really are badass. We go through hard times in life and through struggles, and we just think like, okay, that happened. And sometimes we're like embarrassed by the amount of time it took us to bounce back when a loved one died. And we're like, why did it take us so long? It took you what it took you, but you got back up. You're here now. You're doing it. And by the fact that you went through that, you know, grief, that hard time, the crappy time, and you're still here, you're still standing, that's amazing. And so I think writing those things down and having like physical evidence of it, that's huge.
I love that. And it goes hand in hand with, we hear a lot about gratitude journals and doing all these things, but this what I like about the proof of your badassery journal is that, gratitude journal a lot of times we're grateful for things that we don't necessarily feel we had control of. Like maybe I'm grateful for the space I'm in or the people around me and we can cultivate those things for sure, but the proof of your badassery is actually these are my things that I did, big or small, that prove that I really have what it takes to be that badass person.
Yeah, for sure. And, I kind of just want to turn the tables on you right now.
Okay. Feel free, go for it.
Because I know that you're a total badass and
Oh,
that you're kicking butt over there, but you are like very good at figuring out the thoughts and how we can reframe our thoughts and what to do when we're down on ourselves and kind of how we can turn that around. And I know you have a book coming out about that. Will you talk about that a little bit?
sure. So my book coming out, it's called Own Your Awkward Thoughts, Mastering the Art of Reframing the Way You Think. And it's all about taking those moments in life where we are down on ourselves or down on our situation and learning to think differently about it in a way that puts us in control of where we're going to take it. Like we can't always control where we land or, which like square on the game board we land on to start, but we can decide which direction we're going to move and we can make that decision based on how we are perceiving the situation we're in. A good example I use is I'll take so this book has 60 guided reflections of a situation, and in that reflection they walk you through viewing it the way you might be viewing it to a new way to view it with some reflections at the end. And a good example of that is one that I use a lot where you might be in a cafe or a bar or an event and you're thinking about how you're alone in the corner and you're seeing everybody else greet their friends and saying hi to people and everyone else seems to be meeting people and no one's saying hi to you. Yet if you think about it a different way, you can do the math and realize that the amount of people that have not said hi to you are the same amount of people that you have not said hi to. So perhaps you could take action in that situation and go, wait, if they're not saying hi to me, I'm also not going up and greeting people. So maybe I need to actually go take some action in that moment. And that might not be for everybody, but there are situations like that where if we start to ask ourselves different questions about the situation and the way we're perceiving it, we can learn to view it in a way that is empowering. So I have 6 questions that I teach people to ask themselves that they can apply to any situation. A couple of those are things like, what is a different ending I could write to this story the story that I'm telling myself? What is something I would tell my best friend, or what is something I would tell a younger version of myself in this situation? And it's ways that help us get out of our current way of thinking to empower us to take a step in a direction we want to go.
Okay, so let's make it tactical. So for the badasses out there
Hmm.
that are say they're going to a party, a social
Right.
gathering, and they're feeling uncomfortable, feeling awkward about it, their thoughts are like, okay, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't know what to say. I'm just gonna mess up. I'm just gonna blow this whole thing.
Hmm. So if you're telling yourself that, one like a question might be, how many other people in the room might be walking in with that same thought? How many other people might be feeling the same way? And maybe like with my message to own your awkward, it's all about putting those thoughts and feelings out there first instead of faking it and being like, I'm gonna act all polished and just I'm gonna have my list of questions and be like, I'm gonna memorize these. And if I dare mess up, now I'm gonna feel like a failure. Instead, feeling comfortable to say, you know what, I'm going to go over to someone that's kind of standing on the side as well and be like, don't you feel uncomfortable in these events like this? I never know what to say, but I would like to at least meet somebody. How are you today? All of a sudden, it takes that stress and that pressure out of being perfect. And you can kind of bond in that moment because chances are they're like, yeah, I didn't want to come, but my friend made me. And so I'm kind of hiding over here too. You look for people who maybe you can bond through their behaviors or through the signals they're giving and be upfront with the fact that this isn't my jam, but I'm here doing it. And that's a badass thing.
Yeah, and then there's also like so much power in just a little bit of vulnerability, being like, I
Mhm.
don't even know what to say. That's how other people can relate to you, or you can build a friendship fast.
Right. And that's one of the things, I coach people to speak on stage. And one of the things that I'm constantly reminding them is it's more important to be relatable than to be perfect. If you deliver a perfect speech that is so well rehearsed, that's great. But we could watch that delivered by AI at this point, and it's not going to connect. The things that really make us connect with a speaker is when they trip over the chord and they laugh about it themselves, or they say, "Man, I just forgot my line. Help me remember what was I just saying?" And the audience is like, "Remember that moment?" And Marie was on stage and she was being such a badass, and she actually was okay telling us that she lost her spot because now the audience feels like they're there rooting for you in that moment. And the more perfect we make ourselves, or bring ourselves to present to be, it's almost like we're inviting people to be against us because they want to see us mess up. I mean, I hate to say that people have, bad thoughts, but when you see people who are just so well put together, you're just like, man, I just want to see them mess up one time. Just see a human side.
Or it's just so vanilla. It's so boring. It's like, okay, want, you're perfect, move on.
Yeah. Right. And so exposing that vulnerability is huge. And I teach that when you're getting on stage to do that, but we can pull that into every conversation in our lives in different ways. And, I've done that I've had to do that with my kids when I have made mistakes as a parent where I've said, you're going to learn dad's not perfect. And this is what I've learned since. Or, relationships where it's like, I am trying my best. This is what I'm not doing. I don't feel like I've done well or what I'm learning. So we can at least maybe know that where you're coming from is in good faith.
Yeah. Yeah, and talk about awkward. It's like getting on stage. That's awkward for a lot of people. And I can't even remember the Jerry Seinfeld quote off the top of my head, but it's something like people would rather, be in the casket than giving the eulogy at the funeral.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
so hard for
He's like,
us.
yeah, death is number two. He's like, if you're at the funeral, you'd rather be in the casket. Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah, our worst fear is public speaking. So kudos to you for helping us get over our awkward with that.
Yeah, and if you haven't watched Marie's talk, it's in the Own Your Awkward talk. She gave an awesome talk about owning your badassery.
Yeah, thank you. And it is always one of those things where I don't love getting up on stage. I don't love speaking in public or going to like a big party or something. It's the introvert in me, you
Hmm.
know, but I think that's also part of being a badass. It's like I have to push myself to do those hard things, to do things that I'm not necessarily comfortable with, but I know they will be better for me in the long run. And so I think that's part of it is like knowing you can feel awkward, knowing you can feel comfortable, but also looking at what's in your best interest. And so taking the steps to get there anyway, even if you do it messy.
Yeah, when you mentioned that just now, I started thinking of that quote. I hear different people talk about how, bravery is not, doing the things because you don't have fear. It's like you're afraid and you're still doing them. And I can relate that to the same thing of like you getting on stage, being a badass doesn't mean you don't feel awkward. It means you're still doing the things even though they feel awkward and you're pushing through them and going, "Know what? I'm going to get on that stage. I'm going to deliver my message. I'm going to feel awkward as hell the whole time, but that's what makes it badass."
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes me cringe when people are like, say, be fearless. It's like,
Hmm.
no, I'm never going to be fearless. I'm always going to feel the fear,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
That's just not realistic to
Well,
me.
yeah, exactly. It's not, it's also it's a human variant that we can't control. We don't know what situations we might encounter that we are going to be afraid of. Like, granted, I know that I'm afraid of certain things because I've experienced those things. There are a whole myriad of things that I feel like I would be afraid of, or I feel like I might not be afraid of, but then I get put in that situation, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I guess that does make me a little nervous. So, to say, oh, you can just always be fearless, that's kind of not not realistic, I would say.
Yeah. If anything, to me, that's more intimidating. Like if I had to
Mhm.
wait till I was fearless, I would do nothing ever. It's
Yeah,
like I just usually don't feel that way. I have the fear, especially when you're stepping out of your comfort zone and pushing yourself. It's like, no, I'm more likely to be scared or terrified, and have to take a step anyway. But I do think that it gets a little bit easier. Like once, especially in each category or in different sections of your life, it's like once you start taking a step, you're like, okay, I've done this before. I know that I can do hard things, and it definitely helps you.
yeah. The easiest one for me to relate to is getting on the roof of a house. Like I have always not been a fan of heights, and
You and me both.
yeah, the second house that I owned was had a daylight basement on the front, so the front side was 2 stories up, and the back side was only 1 story up, and so I could get up on the back really easy. But climbing over the roof and to the other side, where all of a sudden I'm that much higher up from the ground, made me nervous. But the more that I did it, because I had to, then it became not such a big deal. And now that I haven't had that house for almost 10 years, it would probably be a little bit of that sense again when I go to get back on the roof where I'm like, oh gosh, I haven't done this for a while. So keeping that practice is helpful.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And it's like the same, like sometimes you get into a habit of doing it at work. You get comfortable pushing yourself at work, and so you start feeling a little more comfortable. But then, like with your finances or in a different area of your life, it's like, no,
Right.
and so it's just a matter of starting over and going through the same process of pushing yourself a little bit.
I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like I've been this person, and I also know people where I've seen them be that person where you see them in a certain role in their professional career, and then you see them at home, and it's like, how come you can't apply the same dynamics? Like you're so buttoned up and fearless, seemingly fearless over here. Like you just seem to push through everything, but then when it comes to personal finances, they're a mess. Although you're accounting for all this stuff at work really well, or vice versa. It's like, what is the deal there? Do you have any insight on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think because this has happened to me totally. Working in law enforcement, I'm used to talking to people, I'm used to interviewing people. And so an introvert having to talk a lot, what?
Right.
But you get in the habit. It's something I have to do every day, all the time. So I get in the habit of talking to people, and it just becomes like, okay, when I'm in this uniform, this is what I do. But then when I'm not, I get in a different role or different headspace. But I think there's so much repetition in that specific role or that specific area of your life, it might not apply to something different,
Mm.
but once you start doing it and create repetition, create habits in that other area, it'll get a little bit easier. But there's nothing wrong if you feel stronger, in one area of your life than the other. It's just a matter of habits and getting the reps
Mhm.
in.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because I've had that conversation with my therapist about like how I'm able to really function and be on in certain areas. And then, like if I'm not sitting in a coffee shop working, it's hard to do that at home and replicating that space at home. Whereas, well, what are the triggers that you've created and what is the mindset that you get into when you're in that space? And so, how do you pull yourself into that mindset? And sometimes we can see them, sometimes they're obvious, sometimes not so much.
Yeah, yeah. Or is it like, okay, is there a certain trigger from this part that you're doing really well that you can apply to the other area of your life?
Yeah.
And look at if there's any common ground or anything you can take from one area and apply it to the other,
Hmm.
because that'll feel a little bit comforting.
For sure. I also think we also have to remember that we are not meant to be on all the time. And so that's also part of it is that we can be on when we're in work mode. And when we come home, we can't keep that level of activity and being focused 24/7. And so our brains do need some time away from that headspace as well.
Yeah, and I think that there's sometimes some worry, like, oh, then I'm not being authentic if I'm this way here and I'm this way
Mhm.
here. But it's like it's a little give and take. You know, life ebbs and flows. It can't
Right.
be the same exact thing in every area of your life. I don't think that's being inauthentic. That's like managing your energy. And so
Mhm.
it's important to know, when you need downtime, when you need to chill, what's good for your mental health, and not have to be on all the time.
Right. Yeah, and remembering that with other people, like we meet somebody in this lane that they're in life, and that doesn't mean that they're always going at that speed. They go home and they're on the residential streets. They're not on the freeway anymore. And so to look at them and be like, "Oh man, Marie's not doing the same thing, or she's having a chill day. Who is this? Like, what? You have downtime?"
I know, exactly. So, question for you, how did you start to own your awkward? Well, first, did you ever feel awkward about being awkward? Was that ever a thing where you were in your head about that? And then how did you go from feeling that way to feeling confident and realizing like being awkward is actually awesome?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that it was somewhat by accident and somewhat survival because, if for my followers, they know this story. I was in the closet and gay my whole life, but married and in the closet and didn't come to terms with that till I was 40 and got to a point where I wasn't in healthy relationships. I wasn't delivering my best at work. I was not feeling like I could really be myself and letting that hold me back in all sorts of areas because I was always afraid of this big secret coming out like, oh my gosh, it's this evil thing that you're gay, right? Like that was my headspace. I'm not saying that's right. That's where I was. And got to a point where I just couldn't live like that anymore and had to make changes in life. But those personal changes that I made also overlapped into my professional career in that, well, I can't live this life that's inauthentic here and not have it affect other areas. And so started shifting and realizing that a lot of things were out of alignment. And after getting out of an industry I'd been in for a while, which was great in a lot of ways, but I needed to make some changes, then I started leaning into helping others do the same because I found that if I wasn't comfortable in my own skin till I was 40, if I could help someone else be comfortable, a week sooner, a month sooner, a decade sooner, then that's just going to be so fulfilling for me to be able to know that my story could help someone else be okay with who they are. And it was very awkward at first. In fact, that's how I came up with the brand because it was just this idea of like, well, I don't really want to be talking about this, but it needs to be said and the conversation needs to be had. And also, it's not just about like my story is like I look at my story and I'm like, this is just a regular guy who made some changes in his life. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that ground shaking in that, I wasn't homeless for years. I wasn't a prisoner of war. I didn't lose a limb. Like there's all these things that I could look at comparatively and say, well, my life isn't bad enough to have this really big story. But also, in a lot of ways, that's what's made it really relatable to people because I think a lot of us are beating ourselves up about our own stories and saying, well, it's not bad enough, it's not a big enough thing to tell or to share or to feel like it has value. And yet we all do because we all have only dealt with our own lives and our biggest things like I talk about this with teenagers where an adult might say, "Oh, it's just a high school breakup. Get over it. You're not gonna, you're gonna love again. You're gonna have bigger loves in your life." Well, that might be true, but it's also still the biggest thing that kid has ever gone through. So we only know how to compare it to the biggest thing we've gone through. So it was really awkward finding value in my story and being okay being so open sharing it. And kind of like to your point about, facing those fears, I've practiced it and I've done it so much that it's almost a little bit much now where I'm just like, I'm so comfortable just throwing it out there that it can surprise people sometimes when they get to know me. Where it's like they ask me, someone will often when they get to know me, they're like, I don't want to pry, but they'll ask a question about like coming out or what was this like or whatever, and I'm just like, oh, I blog about it. Like my life's an open book.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I also think we are just hard on ourselves in a lot of ways, and we're hard on ourselves about our own story, and it's
Mhm.
it's really hard for us to see our own goodness or how far we've come or how big that moment actually was. Like it might be small to you, but it's huge to somebody else, or it matches exactly what they're going through.
Hmm.
Or like the other thing is like when I was $106,000 in debt, I would have been mortified. I would not have told you, I wouldn't want to tell anybody because that's a embarrassing, humiliating story, especially when you're in that moment. So some of these awful things that happen to us or that we're just mortified about, it's like, yeah, it might feel that way now, but imagine how you're going to feel on the other side of it. Like you're going to feel like pretty badass, pretty epic that you did that thing and you got through that thing. And it's a good story to tell, but it doesn't feel good when you're actually in the moment. It's hard to have the big picture point of view to be like, oh, how is this going to feel afterwards? Or how awesome is that going to be when I can say that I've overcome this thing?
Yeah, and I think there's also that is very true, and also uh, almost the opposite can also be true in that when we're in some of our worst parts of life, if it's all we know, then we don't know any different or better, and so we don't know how bad it can be sometimes. Where I remember a friend saying to me, "Man, I just think that's so awful that you couldn't be yourself for so long," and like, what was that even like? And I just remember saying, "Well." I didn't know any different, so that was just to me that was life. That was just all there was. And now looking back, I can go, man, there are times where I'm just like, how dare I let someone talk to me the way I let people talk to me? Or how dare I walk into a room with my shoulders just low and shrunken and low self-confidence? Like that's like, man, I pity that guy. Like that's sad that that's who I was. But at the time, I didn't know any different. And I
Right.
think there's times that are like that. And there's also times where we are like, man, this is not how I want to be. And we see it. So I think both can be at play.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is interesting, like, as you talk about, like, the way you allowed people to treat you or just how you acted, like, people see you right now and they're like, oh, Andy's comfortable talking about all of his awkward moments, talking about all these things. They might see me and think that I'm a badass. And it's like, as you're saying that, it's like, yeah, I've felt that way too. It's like, I remember when I used to go to work when I was in an office and I wore a jacket every day. And I just felt like uncomfortable with my weight, uncomfortable with all the things. And so just as a way to hide, it would be the middle of summer, 90 degrees out, and it's
Hmm.
like
You
I would
got the
have a
extra layer on.
yeah, a big old heavy jacket on, just my way to hide and to try to cover up because I was embarrassed about myself. Like now, I'm like, that's ridiculous. Why would I do that? And I just tried to walk the halls quietly and just not be seen. And that was
Hmm.
probably only 5 to 7 years ago. It's not like it was that long ago.
Right.
So yeah, we have these moments, we have these things, and we don't feel like our best self or we feel like hiding, but like that doesn't mean that we can't come out of it. It doesn't mean that you can't feel like a badass or you can't feel awesome about who you are or get comfortable with it in the long run. It's a process.
Right. I think also it's important to touch on like once you become the badass and you're like, man, I have gone from ordinary to badass, and even on my ordinary to days, I feel badass. How do you deal with those moments where you all of a sudden don't feel like a badass? You're like, wait, I thought this was behind me because it's not just a gone forever situation.
Yes, that's funny because I was going to ask you something similar,
Yeah,
but
because
we'll
it's the
get to
same
that
with
in a minute.
awkward too. Like you own it and you're
Yeah.
like, cool, I can own it. And then all of a sudden something new pops up.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it's like, okay, you're the awkward guy. How people might expect you to respond one way, but how do you deal with it when you're awkward? But we'll get to that in a minute. But as far as the badass thing, like, yeah, I have down days. Sometimes that means I'm going to go offline. Like, I'm not going to necessarily share stuff on Instagram if I'm having a down day and I'm feeling like I need to recruit or recoup and just get back in touch with myself. And I think that's okay. And sometimes it's like having a accountability or a friend like you that I can text and be like, oh my gosh, I'm getting nothing done today. I feel so lazy. Like
Hmm.
just somebody that can like share what I'm going through or remind me that
Right.
it's normal.
Yeah. And that's the same way on the awkward side. It's just a matter of being able to realize it's all a process and to be able to say, I had a great 6 months and now I'm having a down week or a down couple days. And maybe the next time it'll be 7 months, or maybe it'll be 4 months and then 7 months after that. We don't know. But just knowing that taking a step back doesn't mean that we're all the way back at square one.
Yeah. And it's like you look at other people in other industries, you look at athletes, they have an off season. It's not go, go, go all the time. They have to have a
Hmm.
downtime, take a break. It's like, why wouldn't it be the same for all of us? We have to have our downtime. We have to take a break. Maybe we don't always get to pick it, like it's not a vacation, but maybe it's just like when rough things in life happen, but that's okay. You need your downtime.
Definitely. Yeah, I love that.
So, friend,
Hmm.
I never asked you, and I feel like I just gotta know, do you consider yourself ordinary or badass at this point?
Pretty badass. I remember when you asked me when I first was on your show if I was ordinary to badass. I think I said, I'm pretty ordinary. And you're like, no, you're badass. I'm like, okay. So I know enough now to answer that question the right way. Um, but I definitely feel like I am an ordinary badass. Like I'm like there's things where I'm just like, this doesn't feel like that big of a deal, but then it doesn't feel like a big deal because I'm so comfortable doing it. And other people look at it like we talked about public speaking. Other people are like, I would never do that. I would never speak in front of 550 people. And how do you not get stage fright? And I'm just like, that's just what I do. And so it doesn't feel badass when you're being badass in your natural habitat, I guess. But um but some of the things I look at and I have to remember like, no, you know what? Since I've made a lot of life changes in the last 9 years and even before that, but since I've really been paying attention to what I'm doing, there's been some pretty badass things that have happened. And that's the thing that's important to remember. And that's where that proof of your badassery journal really helps because in the days where we're down, it's like our brain instantly forgets any badass thing we've ever done and it just says, you suck. That's all I want to tell you is all the negative bad things and how you're never going to amount to anything and all of your wins are in the past and why are you even trying anymore? But having that moment to sit there and go, wait, you know what? There's been some really good things that have happened that I've made happen that haven't just been like a winning lotto ticket. Like even if you win the lotto, you still had to go buy the ticket.
Yeah. So, how can we connect with you?
Oh, well, you can connect with me all over the internet. My website is awkwardcareer.com, or you can find me on the social media at the hashtag awkwardcareer or Google Own Your Awkward. I'm happy to connect with people. I'm on all the sites, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Happy to connect. Love to chat with people, help them, just take your awkward thing and make it a badass thing.
Yes, I love that.
How do we connect with you?
Yeah, ordinarytobadass.com or ordinary to badass, usually on Instagram. I'm a little bit on TikTok and LinkedIn. At Ordinary to Badass is where you can find me, and I would love to hear from you. And just one thing from this episode, whether it was what Andy said or what I said, what was your takeaway? I would love to hear about that on social media.
I love that. And if you are not following Marie on Instagram, she has been blowing up there. So get on the Ordinary to Badass train on Instagram because it is going crazy. And your your interactions with your audience are I am envious because I see you do it and you when we meet, you're like, do this, try this is what I'm working on but you execute on it so well. There are creators who just kind of dump and run, but when you're following Marie and commenting, you do such a good job of interacting with your followers. It's amazing. So
Oh, thank you. I'm having fun over there. So, yeah, definitely want to hear from you guys.
awesome. All right. Well, everybody else, is there anything else we need to add before we go, Marie?
I think we're good. Yeah. Just stay
Okay.
badass, stay awkward.
Definitely. Uh, own your awkward and be your ordinary to badass self and rock it. You guys have a great day. Thank you so much for listening in for today's show. Be sure to visit awkwardcareer.com to continue your journey. And of course, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends so they can find their awkward side and learn how to own it.